Hello friends, how's it going? Nick Rockley Smile here today with something a little strange. I'm going to be looking through some gaming hot takes, because I just feel like I'm so out of touch right now with the rest of the gaming community, and I wanted to see what the people are talking about. So I thought I'd visit probably the very best way of communicating with other humans, reddit.com, and checking on r/video games. This was not my first choice, actually. I had another thread picked out, and it went and got deleted. So that one was from yesterday. This one is from 4 months ago. I just figured it kind of doesn't matter very much where we get the opinions from, as long as they're relatively gaming-oriented. So I'm just going to go through some of these and give you my thoughts on what people are saying. All right? So, first off, I'll start, says the first person here, Literal Sans. I hate Uncharted 4. That's not that hot of a take, in my opinion. I'd say that's perfectly reasonable. Some people don't like certain games. It's just a subjective matter. I thought it was okay, but I didn't finish it, so I guess I don't have a super strong opinion on it, but yeah, I'm kind of neither here nor there. Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger are just 9 out of 10 games, says New Pickles. Also fair. I think that's entirely subjective. I kind of prefer, actually, going with 9 out of 10s over 10 out of 10s. I don't think there are very many perfect games that exist, and probably we're always approaching 10, but rarely reaching it, so again, very subjective. Shadow the Hedgehog was somewhat decent, says Motorsport Guy. I don't really have much to say about Shadow the Hedgehog. I haven't played it myself. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I've seen some video footage of it. It doesn't look very good to me, but, you know, people seem to really love certain Sonic games that I can't really relate to, so yeah, again, so far these aren't very hot takes. These are all just someone's subjective opinion of a game or a couple games. I hate The Witcher 3, so boring, says Waskarin. Waskarin? Probably Waskarin. That's okay. Man, I'm being so tolerant. I'm just accepting everyone's opinions here. I think that The Witcher 3 was alright. I didn't play enough of it myself to really have a strong opinion, same, so yeah, I don't think it's that boring, but that's fine if they do. Infinite Link 7152 says, Cyberpunk 2077 is now a good game. I think this one is possibly a little divisive still. I think a lot of the changes that had gone into post-launch patches for Cyberpunk still kind of fall short, to be honest, and I think ultimately they ended up cutting the scope down quite a lot for the game, and kind of trickled some of the stuff that was meant to be into the launch into this 2.0 / expansion pack thing. So, yeah, I don't entirely agree, but again, subjective that it's a good game or not. I still had some fun with it. I thought the atmosphere was very good, but I kind of had a hard time recommending it for a lot of those issues that I mentioned. So, it's okay, but good? Meh, maybe, maybe not. Remarkable Mouse 2510 says, Grand Theft Auto 5 is probably the best game released of its time period that still sticks up to this day. Sticks up to this day. Not just because of nostalgia of playing with the boys, but honestly, most of the OST is amazing, lovable characters, grinding is made fun because you do it with friends, and the customization is honestly pretty crazy detail for a game that's almost 13 years old. Well, you have to keep in mind, GTA Online added quite a lot of incentive for Rockstar to continue adding new customization content and additional things to the game, which is kind of why it has the crazy level of longevity that it has. Also, it came out on 3 different console generations, which kind of kept exposing new people to it and kind of kept a cyclical player base rotating in and out. Over time, the game became, as I understand, more monetized, but still generally reasonably fun. I only played it kind of around the launch and got back to it again when it came out on PC, and did enjoy it. But, you know, I don't know if it's the best game released of its time period that still sticks up to this day. Again, not a very hot take. These all seem to be pretty lukewarm takes as far as I can tell. People that have a somewhat common opinion, really. Most indie games are overrated and suffer from some of the same issues that AAA games have. Particularly oversaturation of the same genres and lack of innovation / creativity, says Voyage to Eternity. People hold indie games to a high regard because AAA games suck so much now. But compared to the retro games that they copy, they're really inferior. Okay, this one I have a little bit more meat to dig into, I'd say. I kind of feel like maybe every line here is a little bit ignorant or confused. So most indie games are overrated. There's thousands of indie games. What do you mean most of them are overrated? Most games don't even get talked about at all by anyone. Suffer from some of the same issues that AAA games have. Like what? Live service, creeping monetization, DRM issues, cutting content out of them to add as DLC post-launch. Like, I just don't agree with any of that. Particularly oversaturation of the same genres. Again, what? Are you saying there's too many Souls-like games? Because, like, okay, sure. But there's too many... there's just too many games in every direction, and there are infinite genres for you to dig into, so... I think it's just a matter of perspective and what games you're looking for, and then confirmation bias sets in, and you just kind of see the things you've already seen more. But there are meaningful differences in the vast majority of games. I kind of feel like this is one of those cases where if you were to complain about, oh, there's too many platformers. Do you like platformers? Well, if you do, the core principle that keeps them enjoyable is kind of present in all of them. So there's not really that much to be upset about there. Unless it's a bad platformer, in which case we're having a different discussion and, you know, whatever, that's fine. Yeah, I don't really get any of those criticisms. This is a bad take, in my opinion. Compared to the retro games that they copy, they're really inferior. Go play Geometry Wars Retro Evolved and tell me that it doesn't hold up well to this day, and exactly what retro game? Like Asteroids, does it play worse than Asteroids? No, that's ridiculous. I don't really know what the comparison would be, but I'm just picking that out of a hat kind of at random. It's still a matter of subjective opinion if AAA games suck very much now. I kind of think they might, but there's a lot of context to get into regarding that. So, yeah, I think line by line, maybe I disagree with every single thing that person said. Sorry, Voyage to Eternity. Don't like your take very much, but that's okay, because we're allowed to have different opinions. Don V says... I don't know why, but God of War is just... I'm assuming this is God of War. It could also be Gears of War. Or possibly even other games. There's a lot of GOWs out there. Just not the most incredibly amazing, enjoyable, mind-blowing, de-jerking, pee-pumping, world-changing, pants-dropping, star-birthing, war-godding game to ever exist, IMO. Yeah, they were... they were fun and great, but not nearly as good as they're hyped up to be. Agreed. Oh, such congenial exchange. I actually also really enjoyed Uncharted 4. But wasn't the best game ever material, lol. So I guess opinions aren't everything when it comes to games, haha. Now, if I remember correctly, OP is Literal Sans, who doesn't like Uncharted 4, so just for context, that's how that's going. Yeah, I really like God of War, actually, if that is the one we're picking. I can't say that that list of things there is necessarily true. World-changing, pants-dropping, star-birthing, war-godding. Yeah, it probably is God of War if it's war-godding. What a silly thing to say. Okay, well, this is not really an opinion. It's just silly. The last good console generation was the PS3 and 360 era. I wonder how they got to that, honestly. I would love to ask them a follow-up question, because it feels like there's so much possibly telling about their life in particular. You know, they have like a particularly strong bit of nostalgia for some time that they really enjoyed, and yeah, I don't know. There's been plenty of great stuff on the PS4, and we really haven't had that many console generations. I don't know if you noticed since PS3 and 360. We're in the middle of the one after that, and well, I mean, arguably the PS5 isn't, and Xbox Series X is not really doing everything that I think a lot of us would have hoped for. The industry is kind of moving in a strange direction, hooking onto more subscription services, live service games, and that seems to be where things are headed. So I guess if you want to look at it in that framework, I could possibly kind of agree, because I actually kind of think back to before all of the DLC normalization and shifting of the industry in that direction started, you know, when we were still sort of putting up a bit of opposition toward horse armor, and we had a lot of opinions about, you know, this encroachment and the way that games are going to be monetized now. Yeah, I can kind of see an argument for, like, this is when we had our last chance at things being sort of pure. If you'll pardon the use of that word. It's not generally a good word. But as I see it, there were good times in the 360 era, of course, and I did enjoy both of those game systems as well. But I still enjoyed the PS4 era as well, so... yeah, it's all about the context and the framework that you're looking at it within there. RE4 Remake in professional mode activates my rage mode. Enemies just pile on you with incredible health bars. Incredible. The whole game has been remade beautifully, besides Leon, who's running on the GameCube engine. Stiff mofo, lol. That striker charm should be mandatory for speed and movement. I have the unlimited rocket launcher now. Sorry you asked for a hot take. Okay. I haven't played RE4 Remake, so I don't really know how professional mode stacks up in terms of difficulty. It sounds like it's got incredible health bars, but I'm sorry to hear about the GameCube engine stiff mofo Leon, who sounds just like an absolute terrible experience. This is a very silly take as well. I don't know. Your favorite game isn't as good as you think it is. Ooh, brutal. What a takedown. So you're telling me Super Metroid isn't very good? Are you telling me Dark Souls isn't very good? Symphony of the Night isn't very good? I think it's a very good game, all three of those. To be honest, I don't even think my favorite game is the best in its series. Oh. What a reasonable comeback. Deleted says, I don't find Minecraft interesting. Well, that's fine. It's a very... you get what you put in kind of game. And if you're not really into the exploration or the crafting or, you know, architecturally building yourself a mansion or, you know, what architecturally... building yourself a mansion, you're probably going to not enjoy it as much. Or if you're put off by the graphical style or you don't enjoy any of those factors. It's just kind of... it's one of those games that most people seem to like for one reason or another, but it's perfectly fine if you don't. I guess because it's so ubiquitous, saying that you don't find it interesting really feels like a hot take there. But I know other people that don't like Minecraft, and that's okay. The Lynx Man says a lot of games are too much of a grind anymore. Depending on how you read the typo there, that could mean either thing. A lot of games aren't too much of a grind anymore, or a lot of games are simply too much of a grind now. I don't know what you mean, so... I don't think that there's too many games I've run into that grinding has been a massive factor lately, but I've also played a lot less JRPGs than I used to in the mid-2000s, and that's where a lot of the grindiness comes in. I also don't play an MMO anymore, and, well, I do play Overwatch, but the grinding in that is self-imposed and awful, so... Blue Flame 464 says, online multiplayer-only games are everything that is wrong with the gaming industry. There are too many of them, and they're very similar to each other. Also, always online requirements in a single-player game is utter bullshit and should never be acceptable. The gaming industry does have a lot of bad things going on in the online multiplayer game sector. I agree with you there. I don't know if there's too many of them, because if they all kind of have their own niche audience that they cater to, then it seems like they've worked out the proper amount, because the ones that are superfluous end up kind of failing. I don't know if they're very similar to each other either, but it really depends, again, where you put your critical lens. It's like, do you find a first-person shooter with a military theme to be ultimately very similar to another military-themed shooter, or is, like, Escape from Tarkov meaningfully different because it's an extraction shooter versus Call of Duty's an FPS, so, you know, it just depends how granular you want to be. If you want to group them all together and say they're all FPSs with military skins, yeah, all right, they're very similar, sure. But they all have their own quirks, you know? I'm not really a big fan of any of them at this point, but I have played most of them at some point and have enjoyed them at some point. Always online requirements in a single-player game. You know, I agree with that. It is not a very good thing. It was a DRM issue we pushed back against strongly until it was so normalized by the industry. There wasn't really much else to be said, and they kind of just won that battle. I don't know if you remember, but that time when SimCity came out, and the devs came and said that the online DRM could not be disabled. It is functionally tied to the existence of the game. And then some modders or hackers or somebody figured out a way to disable it, and it still ran, just proving them wrong. And then the game ultimately failed terribly, and we kind of moved on from there. But despite all of that, despite that, what seems like a one battle in favor of us pushing back against DRM, DRM is still more pervasive than ever. So I would love to see additional pushback in that department, yes. All right, Blue Flame also says, longer game does not equal better. I would rather play a 6 to 12 hour long game with quality gameplay rather than a 40-plus hour game that is repetitive and grindy. Also not a very hot take. I really think there's actually quite a movement of people that agree with this sentiment. I also think that it doesn't have to be one or the other. Both 6 to 12 hour games and longer 40-plus hour games can exist in the same industry. And it's not that all games are made from the same constituent parts. There are lots of games that have kind of figured out a way to dole out content over a much longer period of time that is still somewhat compelling, at least in my personal opinion. And there are plenty of games that really focus in on a very tight window of storytelling or gameplay mechanic that resolves within a shorter period. So, I mean, I don't think I would have enjoyed if Portal 2 was 40 hours long. You know, I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think it would wear out its welcome by that point. And I think to that point as well, I think Alien Isolation probably was a bit too long. I think it got into like 20-plus hours, and I just don't know that intensely stealth-focused gameplay keeps being compelling for that long. You kind of figure out the loop, you figure out how the AI works, you kind of seen everything you need to see by that period of time, so that game may have benefited from a somewhat shorter runtime in total. But this is also very, again, subjective and depending on the specific game. And I think this is the trend that I'm noticing with all of these takes, however hot or lukewarm they may be. All you need is a little bit of nuance, and suddenly they're all pretty lukewarm, really. Just a little nuance goes a long way. But it's Reddit, so like this is what I signed up for. I know. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. It is what I expected. All right. Insomnia Central says, I relate to that name, I don't give a shit about frame rate. If I can tell what's going on and the game is fun, well, there you go. The game is fun. Let me see what Literal Sans, our OP, says. Yeah, I agree mostly, but I do love the game being a bit smoother. However, it's pretty much never an issue. Okay, well, Literal Sans, I guess that works for you. That's fair enough. I prefer a solid 60 FPS as often as possible. Games can be playable at 30, yes, of course, and I came from the era of games that barely ran during, like, the N64 era. I remember running Turok 2 on my N64 with the expansion pack and putting it in the high-res setting, and I think that game ran, like, 10 to 14 FPS. It was really bad. Like, it was not really very playable at all. And that was not an isolated incident. There were a good few games like that. I am very happy that games have somewhat put more of an emphasis on smooth frame rate these days, and I have a high refresh rate monitor that I use as often as I can. I really love that as well. I think over some aspects of higher resolution gaming. Like, I'd much prefer a higher refresh rate over 4K, personally. I think I see a much bigger difference in my enjoyment. And as much as I do love a sharp image, and I do, that smooth responsiveness actually goes a much longer way to feeling embedded in the immersion of the game. I think that does a lot more for me personally. But, you know, fair enough. If you don't care about frame rate, you'll probably really enjoy that, you know, variable refresh rate exists, and you can probably get a lot of good gaming in with that. Insomnia Central also says, the new $70 standard isn't that bad. It is for the regularly unfinished, unplayable games. Okay, I think I know what they mean by that. But $70 now is way... I'll explain in a second. Is way less than even a $50 game when I was still playing the GameCube. The new Zelda game was well worth $70. Okay, so for Insomnia Central, I think when they say the regularly unfinished, unplayable games, I don't think they really truly mean either of those words, but they're saying games that you are less likely to finish because they are so long or so content-rich. I don't really know what unplayable means. I'm going to say this is probably like a language thing. Okay, so I totally disagree. The new $70 standard is quite bad. I am aware of inflation, but also consider that games are monetized in all manners of different threads now. We didn't have all of these threads when, and keep in mind, games did actually cost $70 or $80 during the SNES era, depending on where you lived. There were definitely games in the $70 to $80 region, and I don't know that they were really worth that price at that point either. But I think that, in general, budgets have gotten absolutely out of control, and if it necessitates charging this much, then I'd rather we pull the budgets down from the top rather than push them up from the bottom. Because every aspect of living is getting more expensive. You know, our rent, our heating, just bills in general. The price of graphics cards, for example, if you want to play games on your PC. Everything is getting more expensive. All of our subscription services, in fact, things like Game Pass, but you could also argue you save a lot of money using things like that. And I'm sure many people will make that argument, and there's kind of a pushback in another direction about that, but that's kind of for another issue, or another discussion. I think that the $70 standard is extreme, and you also have to take into account that there are very often premium packages in addition to that 71. If you look at something like Diablo 4, for example, $70 is the floor, and then you've got like a digital deluxe package, which I can't remember the exact price. I'm going to say it was $89, and then there was like an ultra edition with a battle pass included for like $110 or something. I may be 10 off in some direction there, but you know, it's like a $30 or $40 additional ceiling to go up to. And then you've got a cash shop, you know, you've got battle passes, and you've got now annual additional expansions coming out for that. And this is kind of the standard that the industry wants to put forward as how they're going to recoup their costs. But the truth is, you know, they're going to take that money and funnel it up to Bobby Kotick. And most of the devs that are working on some of these projects will end up barely making enough to get by and then fired. And this is truly how the industry works. These huge companies treat their employees like crap, use them on a per-project basis, contracted to be, you know, freelancers essentially working under them, and then they fire them at the end of the project. They'll keep on a few, generally speaking, but you see this every time, and over ad infinitum. These companies fire most of their employees. So if the justification is, thank goodness games cost more because developers are making more as a result, no, it's CEOs and executives are making more as a result, not the actual people who worked on the game most of the time. There are exceptions, of course. So I couldn't disagree more. I think that arguing for the $70 standard is fallacious and kind of ignorant and doesn't really take into account the true situation that we're in right now. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Naughty Pony says, gaming has never been better. I think people that disagree with this are adamant that PC gaming is the be-all end-all to gaming, which is a shame since I am a PC gamer too, and that has built many rigs in my lifetime. I just do not think it's the ultimate way to game, which is another hot take that will get me downvoted like it usually does. Has one vote up. So no, you didn't get downvoted. It's not very hot of a take. Some people like console gaming, some people like PC gaming. That's okay. It is, generally speaking, faster and easier to get hooked up and playing a game if you're on console, but again, exceptions do come up there too. As far as gaming has never been better, depends what lens you look at it with. Yes, there are tons of great games being released every month. Baldur's Gate 3, for example, was excellent and continues to be something that I think lots of people are going to keep pointing to this year, possibly even Game of the Year, I don't know. But there have been lots and lots of good games this year, there's no doubting that. The question is, do these amazing games come at a cost? And what might that cost be? And as I just explained in the last one, and maybe this isn't the case with Larian regarding Baldur's Gate, as I think they're a bit of a special case. But a lot of these amazing games are coming out with unbelievable budgets that they are barely making, recouping their costs on, or hitting their targets on. And you have to keep in mind, these are publicly traded companies and have to deliver year over year revenue for their shareholders' expectations. Every time that they hit a new high, they've now hit a new high that they need to top the year after that. And so every year that goes by, we're squeezing a bit more. And I'm sure you can feel it just as much as I can. It's been a perpetual source of frustration. So yeah, gaming's great, but it's all kind of teetering on a knife's edge, and it makes me worried. I'm sure you've heard about the Unity issue. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And if you haven't heard about it, well, we're going to probably be feeling the effects from that, even if we're not game developers, for a long time, depending on how this resolves. But go read up about the Unity issue. It's middleware game engine, and, well, you probably heard of Unity anyway. People that disagree with this are adamant that PC gaming is the be-all, end-all. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like some people are just very hard-headed about it. I certainly prefer PC gaming myself, but I've got most of the consoles. I've always had most of the consoles. I just like knowing what's new and what's happening and try and be part of that whole conversation. I'm not particularly seeing a huge value in a Series X, since I do have a decent PC, and I can pretty much play any exclusives on my PC now, so... But yeah, anyway, that's kind of besides the point. I think it's all a bit subjective, but gaming is still okay, depending on how you look at it. Arctic Sentinel says Kratos should have stayed an angry, murderous godslayer with no redeemable qualities. I respect your opinion to say that, but I completely disagree. I think that possibly the 2018 God of War reboot was one of the coolest things they could have done with Kratos, turning an irredeemable, absolute bastard of a man into a surprisingly interesting and more nuanced character than I ever could have expected. It really made playing through the game a pleasure, and I just was enraptured by the way the story came apart and was unfurled for us. I will say I've not finished Ragnarok despite my intense love for 2018, and I think that the storytelling kind of took a little bit of a hit as it became slightly less relatable in the second one, but I don't know. I don't want to really go too far into that because I still want to finish it. But yeah, I disagree. I think that the pivot with Kratos was very smart and cleverly done and well executed. Zelda should have stuck with the style in the N64 games and dropped the cartoony shit. Well, I don't know. Have you kind of looked at all the various Zeldas over the years? Because there's been a lot, and they've had a lot of different art styles. I know this is a thing that a lot of people say they really hate a certain art style that Zelda has picked over the years. I think they're all kind of interesting for one reason or another. I thought maybe Twilight Princess was one of the lesser interesting ones. It was trying to be edgy in a way that I just didn't really feel like worked. But that's not to say the whole game was bad or anything as a result. I just didn't really like looking at it as much as some of the others. And I did like looking at some of it, just the character design, and, you know, it all felt a little weird to me. I didn't really like turning into a wolf either, but that's personal. Yeah, I don't know. The style of N64 games was cool, and I definitely could see them doing more in that style. But I think they just they take each game in its own direction, and that's kind of part of the fun. You know, there's a musical theme that goes with each one, or a particular instrument or some sort of flourish in that direction, an art style that goes with it, and then a sort of a plot or world quirk that goes with it. So every Zelda's kind of got its own thing going on. I think to homogenize them would probably not be a great call. And I actually, now that I said this, I wonder, does Tears of the Kingdom not really diverge very much from Breath of the Wild? Because they do kind of follow similarly to each other, don't they? But I don't actually know, because I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom. I've only played Breath of the Wild. But my impression was that they kind of looked similar. Anyway, feel free to comment if you want to tell me about that. Yeah, I don't know. Probably what they did with the visuals is fine for Zelda. Stop calling things DLC. That should have just been in the original game. Breath of the Wild DLC was garbage. Okay. Well, that's fairly straightforward. I kind of agree with that, but it's entirely quite an elaborate and complex question of what is DLC and what should have been in the original game. I think when you have sort of like an earmarked piece of content on a disc that is like locked behind a DRM wall as a token that needs to be purchased via the digital distribution service, that feels a bit like what they're talking about. But I also am aware that it's not that simple all the time either. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into what things are and are not DLC, and there's sometimes down periods in development where things can kind of get spun off in another direction, and things are developed alongside in parallel and then ramp back into the development towards the end, which sometimes, because of factors that I couldn't explain because I wasn't, in the process, it ends up going that way. Whether Breath of the Wild DLC was garbage, well, I maybe agree. I don't know. It was motorcycle stuff, if I remember. I don't really remember that well. I don't think I bought it, to be honest. I hate Fallout 3, says Magic Bagel. Fair enough. I really like Fallout 3. I think that might be my favorite one in the series, as odd as that might sound. I know a lot of folks say New Vegas is their favorites. Not a lot of folks say 76, but, whatever. I'm not saying that like I'm defending it either. I don't have that much love for it, but I thought it was slightly better than the dogpiling suggested when the game had just released. It's just another subjective thing, and I mean, these are all subjective. It's just takes. I am for every single player. Well, Smokahuntus, that's entirely your call. In fact, you're getting an upvote. I appreciate that. Have fun. Do what you need to do. Games are underpriced! Oh no. Pseudo Code Red, what are you doing here? Most AAA games were $60 back in, like, 2006, so adjusted for inflation, they should really be... Okay, so I don't even really need to go into this. This is sort of like a contrarian... I just want to see people rage kind of take... I think if they fully understood what they were saying in context, they probably wouldn't necessarily think this, but I guess that's a bit much for me to say, because I don't know what they're thinking, really. Yeah, I kind of explained all the nuance around this, or some of the nuance around this in the prior one. Games aren't underpriced. They make more revenue than ever. They just do it in a lot of different ways, and I feel like the gaming community in a lot of ways just kind of oversimplifies all of that complexity into one single thing and just go along with it like that. They're just like, hey, this game comes out with this price. That is the sum total of all the revenue this game will generate. That purchase only. So no, like, pay more attention. There's obviously other ways that they generate revenue. And you know that. I'm sure they know that. Spruce Moose 85 says console gaming peaked with the 360 and PS3 era. We kind of had that one already up above, didn't we? Online play became more mainstream. Games were creative and fresh, and studios were still able to produce them in a decent timeline. After that, games became too complicated for consoles to truly keep up with them. What? Games were being rushed while taking a long time to make which created all kinds of bugs and glitches. Oh, right, back in the 360 era, there weren't any of those. There weren't really bugs and glitches back then. The majority of PS4 games I had high hopes for were disappointing, and there was too much of a focus on remasters and relaunching franchises, so there was a lack of creativity. Graphics have improved, but in many cases, I don't think the overall experience did. There are some exceptions to this, but the majority of games didn't hit the way the PS3 and 360 did. Yeah, I don't really agree with most of this. We can have that discussion about, was the 360 PS3 era like a really good era because of sort of a naivety before we launched into digital distribution and DRM and all sorts of new revenue streams and monetization means. Maybe we can have that talk as we had already, but I don't know about any of that other stuff really. Online play became more mainstream, implying that it says peaked, so like it didn't become worse as time went on. Online play is more integrated than it's ever been in games, and online connectivity tends to be better in terms of like, you know, less packet loss, rollback netcode, FPS games registering hits hopefully better, although a lot of people use old engines, which doesn't really help much. Yeah, so it's very niche of an argument. Like, you're looking at it through a really narrow lens, I think, to make some of these claims. Games are creative and fresh. There's been creative and fresh games everywhere for the entirety of this industry existing. There wasn't a time when they peaked and then stopped. And I think to say that is just you stopped paying attention and started looking at things that annoyed you, and you saw the same things until you became progressively more frustrated. Studios were still able to produce them in a decent timeline. There's been games that have gone on in production for freaking ages, like Duke Nukem Forever. I mean, this is, again, not stuff people don't know. They just choose to selectively not think about it when they make statements like that. Ill-considered, I guess, is what you'd say about this. After that, games became too complicated for consoles to truly keep up with them. Yeah, what are you talking about? Like, games come out on consoles now, and they're fine, mostly? I mean, if you want to make the argument that Cyberpunk shouldn't have come out on, like, last generation, yeah. And then the thing about bugs and glitches, like, there's always been bugs, there's always been glitches, nothing's changed there. It hasn't peaked, it's just... Every game has its own story, every development process has its own foibles, you know? So I don't know. There's not much here to grab onto, I'd say. This is just sort of an aggravation post as far as I can tell. This is not a hot take. This is the typical gaming was better before that I see so often these days. Another person doesn't like Witcher. I have to say, I'm really always surprised the degree to which in mainstream gaming people still talk about The Witcher as if it like just came out. This is a pretty old game at this point. I'm not saying it's old, but it is not on the forefront of, you know, conversation at this point. Or at least that's what I would have expected. Tomahawk Runner 6 says, Skyrim is a shallow, empty game with some neat RPG possibilities that are tacked on. Exploration is rarely rewarding, combat is horrible, and the story is non-existent. I wanted so badly to love it, but I just couldn't. Hey, that's fair enough if you didn't love it, but I don't know. I don't know that I agree with many of those things. What makes it a shallow, empty game? I mean, there's stuff all over the damn place in that game. Has neat RPG possibilities that are tacked on. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we need a critique lesson when it comes to expressing ourselves on the internet. I think you probably might agree with me there. If you're going to make claims like that, give an example or like dig in a little bit. Make some kind of a case. Just making these broad sweeping generalizations, but I mean, you're not obligated to. Obviously, it's Reddit. You can say whatever you want. But if you're gonna make a case like that and you want to make a very specific case, you know, explain it. And this is a general sentiment I have about any kind of critique. If you want to make an argument, explain it a bit. Yeah, I don't really agree. I think Skyrim is decent at worst. Some people love it. I think it's at least decent. Born Actuator says, Hollow Knight is the most overrated game to exist. Whoa. I don't even think it's bad. You don't think it's bad, but you think it's the most overrated game to exist. But people act like it invented the genre and caused the second coming of Christ. That would be wild if it did that. There are better Metroidvanias. Hell, there's better indie Metroidvanias. F Hollow Knight fans, ONG. Ong. I think you probably know what I'm going to say about this. This just seems like someone that they really don't like in their life really likes Hollow Knight, and it pisses them off for some reason. So they've, like, got a real chip on their shoulder about Hollow Knight. I don't know what Hollow Knight did to this person, but I feel like I should apologize on the behalf of Hollow Knight that, you know, it's gonna be okay. You can just not like Hollow Knight if you want. I don't see how it's the most overrated game to exist at all. Well, ONG, whatever. I don't know what to say. It's not a very nuanced comment, I suppose. Skyrim is a significant downgrade from Oblivion in a lot of ways and gets way more praise over previous entries than it deserves. I'm kind of struggling to see any rationale for saying that. I mean, I guess I don't have the most nuanced understanding of the systems of Oblivion. I have played it for a bunch of hours. But I feel like there's a lot more complexity in Skyrim. Am I wrong? I guess I just don't have enough background to really comment on this, but I feel like my instinct is to say that's just probably not entirely true, or subjectively you really enjoy a system that is in Oblivion more than you do in Skyrim, which is fine. I just don't really see how it's a downgrade. But I don't know. Maybe it is. I just don't know. The game Destiny and its created universe and lore is one of the best pieces of science fiction fantasy ever made. I put it above Star Wars. Says Croissant the Groove. Okay, well, if I could just indulge in a little bit of hyperbole myself, since I feel like... I'll give myself one. I find Destiny to be unbelievably vapid in terms of its lore, but I also have not really paid attention to it. Everything that I could get from it feels like, and again, superficially is kind of how I'm taking it in, so that's probably why that's my experience. It feels like, look at these weird shapes, and also great skyboxes. Let's shoot some aliens. There's nothing wrong with that, if that is indeed what the point is. But yeah, I don't know. I don't see how it gets to be put above Star Wars, but I also don't think Star Wars is that great either, but that's my hot take for today. Maybe there were great things about it, but I feel like a lot of it's been sort of written into the ground at this point. When people say that, actually, I put something above Star Wars, are they taking into account all of the breadth of the Star Wars universe, or are they looking at it specifically as, like, I really liked the first two? I don't know. That's a question for another day. I never made it to Uncharted 4. I picked up the first trilogy pack, and after playing essentially the same game 3 times in a row, I had enough. Oh no, there's a treasure, and the bad guys want it, and there's also a curse, and we have to destroy it while making a lot of incessant juvenile dialogue to appeal to the mainstream man-children so they can convince themselves this isn't just shitty Tomb Raider with fancy graphics. Alright, Scott Whippleton, the third. It kind of had enough of Uncharted. I feel like, you know how this could happen? If you bought the trilogy pack as they said they did, and just kind of played them all back to back, I think this would definitely be a possibility. I personally quite liked the Uncharted series. I don't think that the original holds up very much at all anymore. I think the second and third one are decent, but also have flaws. I think all of them have some flaws. And maybe there is a lot of incessant juvenile dialogue, but also, is that so bad? It's meant to be a bit lighthearted and goofy at times, and that's kind of the fun of it sometimes. It's a romp, you know, it's sort of an Indiana Jones-style romp of a video game. It does have fancy graphics, and it takes you on a, you know, globe-trotting expedition to go find treasure. I think it's one of those games you probably don't need to think too hard about. That's not to excuse, if there are things to critique about it, that they should be left, you know, without mention. I'm not excusing bad factors about it, but I just think that it's not a game that I personally feel needs to be torn into very much. aside from maybe how rough the first one was. That's kind of the main thing I'd say. But yeah, it does seem a bit formulaic, and I'd say if you played them all in a row, you might get sick of it. I happened to play them as they released, so I had a little gap between each one, and it was very exciting. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that. It's fine if you don't like Uncharted, though. I think Left 4 Dead 2 is the best Valve game. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2... Oh, this is 3 opinions. Left 4 Dead 2 is the best Valve game. Yeah, I guess I could see that. If you had a lot of really fun co-op experiences with your friends and really enjoyed the meat of that, there's plenty to do, and it's very replayable, so I could see that argument. I don't know if I have a favorite Valve game in particular, but I do also enjoy Left 4 Dead 2 quite a bit. I think I enjoy Half-Life 2 a bit less than most people seem to. And I don't really have like a strong opinion on Team Fortress. It's fine. I enjoy Portal quite a bit. Portal 2 is very good. I played Portal 2 again fairly recently and actually thought it was better coming back to it than I even thought the first time I played it. As the first time I played it was on 360 when it had just come out. I want to say it was in 2012. And then when I replayed it on the PC, much sharper visually. The voice overall hit pretty hard. Good comedic moments, well paced. Fun puzzles without being too frustrating. Yeah, maybe I'd say like the Portal series is my favorite Valve thing. Well, it says game. I don't know. I can't really separate them. They're both kind of together in my head. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 is better than every 3D Sonic game combined. I don't have a lot of love for 3D Sonic games, so I'm fine with that statement, but also I don't have that much love for Mario Galaxy either, so I'm kind of okay with it anyway. Shooting in Halo is boring. I mildly disagree. Shooting in Halo feels fine. I don't know what that means, really. It's boring. What about it is boring compared to other games where you shoot things? It's kind of the same. Well, our OP agrees with all three statements, so fair enough. And they say, you're valid. Party chat didn't kill lobby chats, the assholes did. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Iron Lord Samus. Leave it to someone with Samus in their name to have a good opinion. Yeah, I think the amount of people who exploit or act as bullies or just treat people badly online because of anonymity and, you know, their own selfishness and egos and shortcomings is really what the problem is with a lot of this kind of stuff. And if there was a useful and meaningful way to exclude them from the experience, that would probably do a lot of good. But there isn't really a way to do that because it's open to the public for the most part, so you kind of have to cloister yourself away in private rooms to be able to enjoy yourself a lot of the time. I say that as somebody who has dabbled here and there in, you know, online shooters and that, which is, I think, where we kind of reference the worst of it tends to go on. And I've obviously played a lot of Overwatch in the last few years. And when I first started playing that game, I didn't think that the toxicity was actually that bad. And now I'm to the point where it's like, it's infected me. Because it's just so pervasive. So I've actually turned off all of my chats now, because I just don't want to hear people talking or being dicks to each other for no reason. There's just no need for it. It's enough stress, you know, without people just being mean. Undertale is fine, but it's nowhere near the godlike status people think it is. I can think of 10 indie games I enjoyed much more. Is that a shocking take? I don't think so. A lot of people think Undertale is decent, but not amazing. I think I might even be one of them. I think it's decent and maybe even a little better than that. It's like, it's a good bordering great game, but I don't think it's godlike. It has a few moments that are a bit slow and a little frustrating, but ultimately the payoff is pretty good. So, yeah, that's not really too hot of a take. Ash Toner with the Carnival of Carnage ICP avatar. Ash Toner 420 says any DLC should have some sort of actual content added to the game or another part of the map added instead of just skins or pay-to-win stuff. Like every DLC for Fallout New Vegas is basically worth it because most of them add a storyline and map. from what I've heard, the DLC for Witcher 3 is amazing. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of covered all of this in other questions. Monetization and DLC and the way that this all interacts with the gaming public has definitely been exploited to a degree, maybe a high degree, depending on which game and who you ask. Yeah, I don't know. Skins and pay-to-win stuff, I guess they're talking about battle passes specifically. And since I was just talking about it, look no further than Overwatch 2 for one of the most egregious battle passes. It just has, 85% fluff. But, $10 more every 2 months or 9 weeks, and you get another set of skins. That's all the progression. So this is kind of the model that a lot of the industry goes in now, and it sucks. I agree with that. I don't know if I would have gone to Fallout New Vegas as the best example, but there's probably worse and better. I guess we'll stop here. I feel like I could just keep reading these for ages, but I feel like this video is going to get very long. It's already an hour long almost, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it. A little run through Reddit and some hopefully more nuanced opinions on takes to elucidate what my opinions truly are. I'd love to hear your opinions too as well. If you have any that are diverging or you just think I'm a stupid idiot and need to be taken down a peg, feel free to say so. I joke, please don't do that. It's just mean. Alright, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care, everybody. Bye.